Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
And Tane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Good day, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge, and Happy New Year, Happy Summer, Happy Winter, wherever you're in the world. We've had a few weeks hiatus because we never have a break. Hopefully you all had a fantastic summer / break, doing whatever you do, making memories, being with those you love, that you care about, and I really just tackled the new year and whatever that looks like for you. Tani, how are you? How has your break been?
Yeah, good. Busy enough. I spent the summer up in the vineyards, which was pretty cool. Always enjoy spending some time up there. Spend some time with my sister's family, get to reflect, relax, do some new things, learn some new things on the vineyard this year, which was pretty cool, pretty exciting. But glad to start coming back down to Dunedin in the last week or two and start settling in for another year.
Another year of joy. And any big learnings over the summer?
I think over the summer it was a good point to reflect on, some big changes that were happening. Obviously, I'm not going into full-time study again this year, which is a pretty dramatic change, I think, from what I've been used to the last 4 years, and also just a few other changes that I've, almost got to a point where, not that I was comfortable, but I think comfortable enough to, just go with the flow. And so it's been a huge change trying to shift that mindset. And I think especially the last couple of weeks, I'm currently still on the job search, which I know something will come up, but I think it's teaching me to trust the process and know that something will come up, something will, eventually come. And if it doesn't, I've got plenty of other things that I can put my energy and focus towards. And I think that's the trade-off. I've decided that this year is going to be a year where I want to really focus on the things that I'm passionate about and the things that I enjoy. And sometimes that means that, there are going to be challenges in terms of finding a job that you love and, still being able to pay the bills and having the reality of the real world. But again, trusting that process and knowing that I'll come through it, one way or another. It's just about having that patience and looking at the better side of things, even when it seems like nothing's really going my way at the moment. So a few learnings there, but always still positive, and that's the main thing.
Yeah, that's the key thing, just to be patient, and you've got all the skill sets, and like you said before, you're just going to take whatever comes along and look for those passions that you enjoy, and what it looks like. My learning over the summer, lots and lots of learnings, but I was given a book at the end of last year from my colleague as a Christmas present / end of year present, and I've heard of this book a lot of times, but I never thought too much about it. But to Angus and to Tane, and to our listeners, if you haven't read this book here, it's called A Little Life by Hanya Yangihara. It is a fantastic book. It has just blown my mind. Every page I read, it's like it's a story where it's just about human nature and our human lives are, and maybe we can talk about it with our guests as they jump on. But it's really profound in the way it's spoken to me in ways that, hey, we all go through our lives. We all think about how our norms are our norms, and how we vision and see other people, and how other people see us are two different things, and how we wear these masks all the time. We speak about these masks, and trying to unveil those masks even to the people that we love and care about sometimes is really quite hard. Actually harder to those people than others that are strangers. So as I read through that novel there, it's every page is, I just think about stuff in my world or the world around us. And it's every book that I read has something that stands out apart from comics, but even those have things. But it's something that over the summer I really enjoyed. So if you haven't read that book before, this is a book recommendation out there, A Little Life. But hey, enough about us. We can keep bantering on and on and on. We are pretty honored and privileged today. This is our first podcast of 2024. And for our regular listeners, you know that we scour the country and the world to find people that we think are interesting. We know everyone is interesting. We know everyone's got a story. But as we always say, we have no budget. We don't get paid to do this here. So we can only get one person on at a time. And I'm really lucky, really privileged, and really honored to invite our guest Angus onto our podcast today. Welcome to Past Knowledge, Angus.
Kia ora koutou. Great to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Angus. Angus, for our listeners out there, do you want to just tell us a little bit about who you are at this point in your life, and then we'll go from there?
Of course. So, ko Angus toku ingoa no Ahitereria okutipuna no Ahitereria aho. Currently, I'm living in Porneke. I am fortunate enough to be working with UNICEF Aotearoa in a child and youth engagement role. That has been my past probably 10 years has been child and youth engagement and quite heavily with UNICEF. But before moving to beautiful Aotearoa, I was based in Sydney in Australia. Seems that I'm one of the few people who is coming this way as opposed to the other. All the news upon my arrival was about how many people are leaving Aotearoa, and I don't get it. It's such a beautiful place and the people are incredible. So been here for about 9 to 10 months, and yeah, it's awesome to be here because I know quite a few of the rangatahi that you've had on here and consider myself fortunate to get to work with a lot of them. So the fact that this is a space that's, highlighting the voices of young people is awesome. So glad to be here.
No, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And I think this is why we have you on here, because Lola and Artie and Nate all speak highly of you and the work that you've done with them. But people talk about the awesome stuff that you do. What made you move the other way against the salmon? The salmon are going this way and you're going the other way. What brought you here?
Yeah, I'd been to Aotearoa quite a few times and always loved the place. But I also grew up in Tasmania. So despite living in Sydney recently, I grew up and I spent, 20 years of my life in Tasmania. And so will always consider myself a Tasmanian. But it almost makes a little bit more sense because the similarities between Tasmania and Aotearoa are definitely there. And just Sydney is, very much the hustle and bustle lifestyle, to the extent that I think it's quite negative to a lot of people's mental health and how they go about their lives. And it was just very go, go, go. And, also climate change is affecting that city in a lot of really awful ways. It's unbearably hot a lot of the time. We've also had the worst floods in history recently. And it just really concerns me that, it's a place that is going to be really impacted by climate and was becoming unlivable to me. So moving here made sense because, yeah, as I said, a beautiful place, had been before. I knew, the people here are lovely, and an opportunity came up to come over and work with UNICEF and grabbed it, and couldn't be happier, to be honest. I will be living here for a long time, I imagine. I hope so. And it obviously makes it a lot easier being from Australia, moving here.
100%.
Pretty much considered a Kiwi legally, as far as once I arrive. So yeah, that's made it really easy as well.
Well, that's really beautiful. A couple of things that you mentioned there is, you've gone against the tide, like you said. People that come to New Zealand, people from New Zealand want to move to Australia. That was my goal when I moved to New Zealand 20 odd years ago, to spend a year in New Zealand or 2 years and then move over to Australia. And here I am still here because there's something pretty magical about this place. Or I lost my passport. I don't know which one it was, but we'll go with magical at the moment. But what I loved, or what I want to touch on, is something that's really important, and I think the world knows, is the whole climate change aspect. You spoke about Sydney. People always think about the islands and think about places like the Pacific that's getting affected, but actually the big cities are the ones going to feel the greatest effect, because there's such a big population and we don't see those changes right in front of us. And as we're living in a country where climate change is becoming more active, the summer this year has been pretty crazy. What are your thoughts about how there's climate change deniers? It's always going to be deniers for different things. But if you were to talk to somebody and say, hey, this is what's happening, what would you say to them? Just to say this is real. It's not a made up hocus pocus thing. It is real.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that people cannot argue with is when you ask them themselves, have you noticed anything changing in the weather in your lifetime?
Yeah.
And that they'll always be able to say yes. They may not be able to rationalize why or the reasoning for it, and you may get in an argument around that. But if you can kind of have a base level of an acknowledgement that the world is changing and it is being impacted by that, you can start there and then kind of work differently. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who have quite dismissive opinions on climate change, and those people are everywhere, and that's fine. But you can have a conversation with them about their lives and how things, as I said, are still being impacted. This can happen a lot with regional communities or people from farming backgrounds. I'm from a regional area, as I said, Tasmania, and so I get that. I know how important farming is, and I know what regional communities are often left out or just required to do something because of a bigger city and all of that kind of stuff. But it is really impacting the way of life of the people living there. It's affecting crops, even if you can't, as I said, rationalize the reason for it, you can see that there is that impact. And then you can also talk about how addressing climate change, whether they believe it or not, can have really positive things in their life regardless of it. So, that might be making electricity cheaper because they use more renewables, and maybe looking at different farming techniques to improve their stock yields, but it's also better for sustainability and the climate. And ways that, addressing these issues will also positively impact them. So you can bring people along on the journey with you. But also, if they continue living their lives thinking this, they're going to wake up and soon see that that's not going to be what happens into the future. It's just going to get hotter. There's just going to be more disasters, and you can't really close your eyes to all of those either.
Yeah, and what's so beautiful about your answer, Angus, is that humans inherently are always about it's affecting other people. But with the question that you ask, it's actually about other people. It's about, hey, how have you noticed whether in your life straight away people are going to be like, actually, I can comment about that, And the minute you make anything about person, people are happy to talk about it. But actually go, hey, wait a minute, this is actually true. It's somebody else's problem. So I love that. That's a very good tip there about anything actually.
It is how I work with young people as well. Is you actually ask them. I mean, it doesn't seem like rocket science here, but you actually ask them about their lives, not go in and say, this is what's happening, this is bad, let's fix it. It's, what's happening for you? How has your community changed? What are the good things in your community? What are the bad things? And let's go from there. It's getting onto the same level with everyone as humans. I think it's good grounding for any conversation.
Yeah, which sounds so basic, but actually so hard for a lot of people because for different reasons. And talking about young people, how did you get into the space here? When you finished up your study or what you were doing, were you like, hey, young people, voices, this is my thing, or did you just fall into it and just grow into it and go, this is actually pretty cool?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I fell into it. I think there's always work that goes behind certain journeys and small trajectories. I obviously feel very lucky where I've landed, but I started by studying international relations. That's what my degree and my master's is in. And I specialized in the Asia Pacific and the relationships between Australia and the Asia Pacific at the time. Finished my master's. I wanted to be a diplomat. That's a very hard thing to become. No matter how much of a want there is, there's often a lot of experience required before getting there. So I had to pause that, but I moved to Japan to teach English in a primary school there. I thought that would be a good experience. It would be somewhat loosely connected to what I had studied, just because I had an understanding of Japan, had been there a few times, could speak some of the language, and then could teach, which was a job, which was great. And so I did that, and it was an awesome experience, and recommend to everyone, if possible, to try and do something like that. But then moved back to Sydney following that and kind of thought, what can I do that combines my interest with politics in the world and now my kind of love of educating and working with young people? And that's, a lot of that would lead towards being a teacher perhaps, or something along those lines, which I highly respect, but I think that people who are teachers are much stronger than I am. And so I deviated to kind of youth work, and that started with helping facilitate a youth parliament program. I know that there is a similar youth parliament in Aotearoa. In Australia, it's run by the YMCA. And so I got a role as the facilitator of youth parliament, and that meant that I was working with young people to help create bills, to create policy, and they got to, you know, live a year as a representative essentially of their local member and communities. And that was incredible. You know, they got to go into parliament, give amazing speeches. You know, I think a lot of countries would be run a lot better if we allowed that to be what happens in real life as well.
Yeah.
But I did that for a few years and really loved it. But then did another pivot, which was wanting to concentrate more on the policy stuff that I had studied. So I paused slightly with the, you know, face-to-face kind of youth work stuff and got into policy and advocacy for a youth peak body in New South Wales. And so essentially all youth workers and young people, we were kind of the voice essentially to try and work with them and to represent them in government in certain areas. And so that was really incredible because I got to work with young people to create policy. And that was, you know, as broad-based as looking at the rights of renters for one part, and then also looked at, you know, children and young people as victim survivors of domestic and family violence, or also employment opportunities. And so it was a really broad range of issues because young people have, you know, lots going on. And that was awesome. And then finished that, needed a bit of a break. This was all COVID time, and I think that put a lot of things on a lot of different people. Yeah. So I had a few months off, essentially to rest and try and figure out what's next. And there was an opportunity that I saw at UNICEF in Australia, and went for that, and then kind of started in that area. I will say the power of LinkedIn, everyone. I'm not sponsored nor paid by them, but particularly young people listening, get on LinkedIn and use it as a living resume, because 3 of those opportunities or works things that I did came up as people approaching me on LinkedIn, because they had seen what I had done, seen, you know, the work, the outcomes and all of that, and approached me for work, which I never thought would be a thing that happens. And so that's how I've landed in the UNICEF family. And between Australia and UNICEF Aotearoa now, it's almost been about 3 years in this space, and still loving it. And now at UNICEF, it's kind of the perfect mix between those 2 previous lives, where I have the engagement with young people directly, particularly, you know, the young ambassadors and some of the young folks that have been on here, and also work with them to create policy to then present to government, or to, you know, attend COP like we did, or other important kind of decision-making processes, and bringing young people along the ride with that. So it's been a mixed bag, but it all somewhat connects. And I'm of the opinion that nothing that you do is kind of pointless or worthless unless you want it to be. And you can get skills or development or anything from watching a YouTube video if you want, or you can watch it as a YouTube video and get nothing from it. So everything that I did kind of still supported me along the journey as well.
And that's great, because, you know, as you said before, it was broad brush with all the things that you got involved with, but I think at the center of it all was the passion that you had for positive change with the young rangatahi and young people, not just generating the change, but being involved in the conversation, because sometimes young people are fantastic, but they don't know how to use their voices, and you have to help them use their voices. or conversely, they have the voices and you go, cool, this is the way you can use your voice. So it's really, really beautiful. But also while you were doing all that, Angus, you forgot to mention that you also won an award. When you're working at the, I've done some research on you as well, Angus.
Yes, yeah.
You won an award. Tell us about the award that you won and how that features for you as a young person at that point in time in your role.
Yeah, so one of the areas that I'm really passionate about as well is diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, but particularly for the LGBTQIA plus community. I identify as a cisgender gay man, and a lot of the work that I started doing was trying to bring, the voices of queer young folks, particularly into that space as well for decision making, for being a part of things that aren't just the queer space. Often it will be kind of one thing, but it was organizational wide and bringing those voices within it, which was really awesome. So I did that for quite a while. And, the YMCA historically, the same with a lot of international non-government organizations, was, set up historically with quite conservative and or religious reasons. Times have changed a lot, and the YMCA would never say it's a religious organization now, so I'm not trying to say that, but there were certain people that were still part of the organization that were of that time and of that thinking. And so I did a lot of work within New South Wales and Australia trying to change I guess the approach that the organization had with working with young people and trying to say we should be working with all young people, regardless of their situation, their identities, and we need to become better to be able to do that well. Because we know that there are more young people are identifying as LGBTQIA plus now than ever before. And so if you're working with young people, you're going to be working with that community. So it's about making the organizations better who are doing that work. And so I helped establish some work within the YMCA that kind of blossomed across the organization. It was definitely not just me. There was a lot of people involved across the board. But, it ended up being that, in Victoria, they had a fully LGBT sporting event at a gym just for the community, which, within the YMCA, one of the things that I found most is just people feeling unsafe to go to gyms or sporting areas if they were within the community. They just want to go to the gym, which is not hard to believe. And so, but we tried to make a space so it was just for that community. They felt safe. It then helped them feel comfortable and welcome moving forward. It also progressed to 2 years ago, I think it was now, where the YMCA was in Mardi Gras. It was the first time that the YMCA had marched in Mardi Gras. And I guess from where it had started to that point was such a big step, with lots of years of work and people going into it. So along that journey, I happened to get an award for some of that work, which was incredible and something I didn't think would happen. It was about being a role model within, the LGBT community, as the Australian Workplace Equity Awards. And I was in a room filled with PwCs and Deloitte's and all of the big businesses that spend lots of money in diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is great. They should keep doing that. We love that. But a lot of the work is done by grassroots organizations or people like on the ground.
Yeah.
And so, it was me and my boss at the time felt very out of place in this room with all of these people. They were all getting all these awards, and then I happened to win, and it was, shocking and amazing, and just, a really big point for my career and I guess my life as well, to see that the work that I had been doing in that space was getting some acknowledgement. And, they said that part of the reason for getting the award as well was that I volunteered outside of my work with an organization called 2010, which is essentially a youth crisis support service for queer folks in New South Wales, and volunteering time to essentially peer mentor, peer work, support however help raising money for them. I think that, yeah, organizations like them, Rainbow Youth, similar in Aotearoa, that are literally helping save lives and young people, and showing them, it gets better and where they can actively participate and that kind of stuff. So those kinds of organizations are always been, I guess, the pinnacle for me for supporting their work. So yeah, through all of that, then I did get an award at one point. But the basis of it is the work that I do in that equity and inclusion space. And that's something I'm still really passionate about today. It does extend past, the queer community. I tried to do a lot of work supporting Indigenous Australian communities when I was working there, and now Māori Pacifica communities in Aotearoa, just because it's such a strength of a country, of a culture, of the people, that should be highlighted, and making sure that young people know that and can take passion and strength in that about them. So a lot of equity and kind of social justice work flowing from that, I guess.
What's beautiful about that is because it's, as you said before, it's not just about a title. It's about everybody is the same essentially, and let's not just marginalize people. Let's just get everyone on the same page and get them moving on. And but you need a voice. You need a voice. You need someone to support it and to build it through, which is awesome that you acknowledge for that there. Because sometimes we do all the hard work, we don't get acknowledged, and then not that people do want to be acknowledged, but the acknowledgement then allows others to go, actually, wait a minute, we can now make some change. We see that many times, that lots of people do some amazing work, but until you have an award and acknowledgement, it's just like, okay, whatever, it's just a hobby that they're doing, or just something on the side. But it's so weird that we live in a world where an award justifies or validates anything that you do. It's such a crazy world that we live in.
It's strange, and I definitely don't do anything for awards, and I don't even big up them. It was more, the reason why this was so great is because the people who had been winning the awards were people not like me,
which is
and that's the thing that I would like to see, is keep the awards going, great, but actually look at the people who deserve to be winning it, because they're out there.
100%. I think in a similar vein and sort of vein, Tane is navigating this really interesting field at the moment. So Tane, as you said at the start, Tane, you can speak about yourself. You are working in the world of coaching, but you love working with young wahine. But because you're a male, let's face it, it has been challenging for you.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a lot of learnings, a lot of I guess boundaries and stuff like that you have to navigate. And especially being a contact sport, there's a whole lot of things in terms of teaching in a practical sense, and how that looks from a safety point of view, and all those concerns that you've got to navigate. And I think, especially with me being so close in age to these young females that are coming through, compared to either parents of a daughter in the team, or something like that, where there's a distinct boundary and a very clear cut boundary from the start. Obviously they still have their obstacles that they've got to navigate, but I think it's a lot harder coming in as a younger male into that space. But it's been something that I've learned to appreciate a lot more about the female space, about female sport. And for me, I think the biggest thing I've been having discussions around at the moment is there's a lot of small things that probably often get overlooked or overseen, and not necessarily as a way to diminish the value of female sport, but more just an oversight that we don't think about. There's a perfect example is having training facilities where there's a bathroom open, so that if the girls need to go toilet, for the boys, they can go in the bush, and that's cool. And so it's often overlooked, but such a simple thing that allows them comfort to come to training and not have to worry about those things, or worry about I've got to make a stop beforehand to allow myself to get through training without running the risk of something like that happening. It's the same with changing rooms and having that separate space for them, so that they're comfortable to get changed, to do all these things that I think again isn't necessarily an overlook to diminish the sport, but it's an oversight that is simple enough to change. You know what I mean? So I think it's an interesting space, and something that I am very passionate about. And I think you're right too. Like it's sacrificing these next couple of years, I think, for me to get some experience in the scene, get get to know more people around so that I can start developing myself as a coach. And I know there's a lot of things I can change, but even with our training camp last weekend, we just started, which was pretty cool to, I guess, get some truths from them about, things that we could do better coming from last year, some individual work-ons, stuff they're already doing behind the scenes, which is very cool and shows that we must be doing something right within the space. So I've really enjoyed my time so far, and I'll continue to enjoy it. Yeah.
They'll definitely, young people will always let you know whether they like something or not, which is great. And, if you've got a good relationship with them, which you must do, then they're going to be forthcoming with things. And it's great because it'll keep you grounded, but it'll also make you improve on things as well. So, yeah, it's always a good journey to continue on, keep learning from as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating, as you said before, Angus. A lot of young people are now identifying as part of the community. So working in schools, so as I do, I have to be well aware of that there. And when a young person says to me, "Hey, XYZ," I'm like, "All right, cool." As in the past, the old me would be like, "Yeah, whatever." But then as I've learned through the journey, I was like, I've actually got to listen. If somebody's telling me something, it's because they are feeling this thing, or I have not used the correct terminology, and and that's a learning thing. As you said in the past, you'd be like, "Yeah, whatever. This is my world, not your world." But the more and more that you work with young people, actually, and when Lola jumped on here and spoke about why she started her creative happy media, it wasn't about, hey, a 15-year-old today versus a 15-year-old in 1960 are two very different human beings, two very different, and the access to knowledge, the access to information, the thought processes are totally different. And that's something that's really important to remember, not just for us, but also for anyone that's listening, that hey, young people are young people, but they're not just young people, if that makes sense. It's a crazy awesome world, but you get to see it every day. Angus, so we spoke about how you got involved with UNICEF, but the role that you have, it's probably a dream role when I read about it. What would a day in the life of Angus in your crazy awesome role be like?
Yeah, I constantly say that I think I've got the best job within UNICEF, and I think that probably extends to a lot of organizations. I think I have the best role. So a regular job day would be, I've got lots of meetings and engagements with people within UNICEF that are maybe trying to do a piece of work. And my role will be working with them to see how we can get the voices of young people within that and formulating with them ways of doing that. At the same time, I'll be having communications with our young ambassadors or other young folks and running the idea past them as well. So I kind of I'm essentially a bridge between a lot of the work that happens and then young people. And my role is to help educate, empower, inform our organization to be able to do that work meaningfully. But also then, mentor, work with a group of young people to be part of that space as well. And that can be really broad in what the issue is that we're looking at as well. The mandate for UNICEF, we're the largest children's rights organization in the world, and we extend from, providing water, sanitation, hygiene in the Pacific to emergency shelters in war-torn Ukraine to a bill about something really local in Aotearoa that we think is going to impact on the rights of children. So as an organization, it's really broad, and we want to essentially focus on things that we know are going to have the largest impact on children. And so my role within that, seeing opportunities or listening to the young people and what they want to explore, look at, fight for, advocate for, making connections with that. That may be organising a meeting for them with their local member of parliament. It may be supporting our advocacy team with a submission into parliament by getting quotes from young people to have directly in there. Could be visiting a school to just chat about the work of UNICEF and children's rights. A lot of our mandate as well is about trying to increase knowledge of children's rights among children, young people, and adults as well, and people making decisions. And then, you know, also keeping an eye on the world the whole time. There is obviously a connection between the two, but there's also a disconnect as well. But our role within New Zealand and Aotearoa is to also obviously support that greater international work, and a lot of the donations and funds that we get as well will go towards overseas pieces. And so just keeping an eye on that, because, you know, our role within the organization may be, and this would not be mine, but to connect somebody from Gaza with local media to be able to share the UNICEF message within Aotearoa. So there could be that kind of connection piece as well. So it can be really broad, which is another reason why it's great. It changes a lot. And
I can imagine. Yeah.
I'm really fortunate that I get to, you know, travel a bit around the Motu, visiting young people in different areas as well, and hearing from different young folks with different backgrounds, which is an awesome part of the job as well. And then, yeah, obviously bringing that to the global stage sometimes, like we did with COP at the end of last year.
Yeah, let's talk about COP. You know, I mean, thank you for sharing that, because it was a trick question, because it sounds like your day to day could be anything. You have the job description stuff, but then actually, you know, the minute you interact with young people or with anybody, your job just changes dramatically, as opposed to being an accountant, which is pretty much stock standard. Sorry to the accountants out there, but you know what I mean.
We need accountants. Thank you, accountant.
We need everyone out there, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about COP, because that's obviously something that happened late last year, and I think we got in touch just before you jumped on a plane to head to Dubai. What is that like for you? And the reason I ask this question is because a lot of people I speak to are like, "Oh, New Zealand is a small place. It's tiny. It has no influence in the big wide world. We've only got a small population. Whatever we say, who actually cares?" Whereas I don't think that's the truth. But being at that big stage there, what is that like for you as a person, as a representative, but also as an individual?
First, I fully reject the small country place doesn't have an impact. The same thing happened to me in Tasmania, very much similar. You know, we don't need to hear from those folks. Why does it matter? What do they have to say? I mean, there's a few parts to that, obviously, like
Yes,
that's
totally
silly, but also you miss so many opportunities by thinking that way. So I guess, you know, this was the largest youth delegation that has been to COP from Aotearoa, which was an incredible opportunity and experience. And the two reasons why I think it is so important is that when you are a part of these global conversations, people recognize you as New Zealand Aotearoa, because oftentimes they've heard about a lot of great things that have come from this country, whether that could be related to, you know, having the zero carbon bill that happened, whether it could be the work with Māori in the past. You know, there's a lot of things that people look to from New Zealand as well. That's a really great example of doing things, you know, women's suffrage. There's a lot, you know, for a small place. And so when you get there, more often than not, they are happy to have your voice there and would like to hear what you have to say about things. So that's one part. And then the other part is that until you're part of those conversations, you can't participate in them, nor bring people domestically along the ride with you. And so what I mean by that is the group of young people are now going to be able to bring all of that learning, all of those connections, all of the passion, all of the things that happened at COP back to Aotearoa, and to, you know, bring that into their community work. The learnings from that, and the connections that they made mean that they've now got a global network of collective impact to be a part of. And so those are kind of the two main things about it. But, you know, when we were there as well, also as a learning experience for young people, if we say, oh, why should small New Zealand be there, then people from New Zealand would never be there. And, you know, we are obviously, everyone should, try and engage and learn a bit more about outside of their own lives. And this is one of the ways of doing that. And yeah, it was just so overwhelming as a place. Like there was 80,000 delegates at COP, which, bigger than most of the cities in Aotearoa, just in one spot.
Yeah.
And it was in the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai, and that place, just the infrastructure and the buildings and how the highways are 20 lanes or something. Like it's just another kind of planet. But we, learned so much from the people that we interacted with, because people from all over the world were there. It wasn't just, a delegation from Aotearoa going to Dubai. It was a delegation from Aotearoa going to meet all of the key players in the world in this space. And we have a role, a significant role as a country, particularly within this region. And there should be nothing that stops us from doing the best at it. We shouldn't just try and slide through okay just because we can get away with it. And that was highlighted for sure when we were there. And so now it's exciting to see what those learnings from the young people can bring to back here.
And why, how do I ask this question here? The question is, it was the biggest delegation. How did you end up getting this big delegation? What was the point of difference from the last time to now to actually get more young people on to jump on and go across?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great example of like the full advocacy journey. I think a lot of people think that advocacy is a pushing for something and that something then happens and then you stop. But it's not. It's often a really long journey with a lot of people that play a lot of different roles within it. And so this advocacy journey started with UNICEF Aotearoa before I came along, and it was talking to the climate change minister of the time and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to essentially say to them, we need to do better. How can we do better, and how can we support you in that work? That meant that we were part of the conversations around the delegation. We were then able to apply for party overflow badges, which is part of the delegation that then gets to go to the daily briefings and all those kind of things. And so in the past, historically, there's been one or two young people, often people who you have to finance it yourself. So it's financially prohibitive to the large majority of humans, which we completely acknowledge. And so the young folks in the past who had gone, incredible, awesome people for sure, but would often be a bit older, probably into their careers, able to finance themselves over there, or maybe employees of MFAT themselves and that kind of stuff. So we were there as, a delegation of young people that were not involved in the official mechanisms of getting the people there, and were able then to give a lot of insights, kind of external insights to what came up. And also the broader picture of that was that this year's COP, there was a dedicated day for children, young people in education. It was only the second time that had ever happened. The president of COP had 100 youth representatives as well from across the world. And so there was an effort from the organizing presidency body to have young people a lot more part of this. So that was going on. The years leading up to it, a lot of young people have been protesting every year almost. You can go back to Glasgow, you can see some of the huge protests of young people been wanting to be a part of it. That work happened. And then the president started listening to that and bringing things in, and we were advocating here for local youth voices to be there as well. The culmination of all those things kind of meant that this COP was the perfect time and place to have that large delegation and to really jump into bringing children and young people there. So it may not happen again. Every year may not be the largest youth delegation, particularly when I know New Zealand and Aotearoa should be a part of it, but it's very far away. Dubai was far enough, but the next year it's in Azerbaijan, the end of this year it's in Azerbaijan, which is also very far away. And so, picking and choosing as well when the moment is right. So noting that we could present and be a part of this COP with youth voices, whereas next year it may not. Sorry, this year it may not be as much of an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because people, like you said at the start, there's a whole story that happens. It's not just an overnight decision to make. Hey, we're going to take whatever 10 people or 20 people. It's a conversation that happens years and years, and it's like you said, with any advocacy, it doesn't happen overnight, and people don't see all the hard work that goes behind the scenes, and you just go, oh, this happened overnight. It doesn't happen like that there.
Totally.
I have to ask you about your t-shirt.
Yes.
Yes, I have to ask you about a t-shirt, because it is that time of the year, and it is today. We're recording on the 27th of January.
Yeah.
Yes, let's talk about the t-shirt there. What does it say? It says always was awesome. Yep.
There's always was, always will be.
Yeah.
Yesterday at the time of recording was the 26th of January. In Australia, it is known as lots of different things. Invasion Day, Mourning Day, but it's also known as Australia Day at the moment. But it should not be, for many reasons. I know that the conversation around it is kind of getting to the point where there are more people supporting changing the date than there aren't, like, people sticking with it. And so the conversations around it can sometimes get pretty wild. People boycotting supermarkets for not selling enough flags, or not going to certain places because they don't have an Australian thing on, blah, blah, blah. But what we do know is that on that date, it was when the colonization of Australia began. And what we also know is that there were Indigenous Australians there, regardless of Terra Nullius being called. There were so many Indigenous countries, tribes, communities, people that were there living and thriving. And so that date marks the change of that, and has incredibly deep significance to Indigenous Australians. And I just cannot fathom wanting to do something when you know how much it hurts someone else. And this, again, a lot of these things I look at across life in general. Why would you want to do something with the knowledge that is traumatizing for that person? You know that, and you're still going to do it.
Yeah.
And that's the case within Australia. And so a lot of the time I will wear t-shirts and statements outside of just Australia Day time. I'm wearing it around Aotearoa this week, to try and make sure people kind of know what's going on over there as well. But it's not just let's do it around this date as well. It's an ongoing thing. So fully supportive, let's change the date. It's also really interesting to look at it at the same time that Waitangi Day is about to come up in Aotearoa, and the incredible groundswell across the board of support, I would say, for Te Ao Māori, Te Reo Māori, Rangatahi Māori, and the passion that is behind that, and how it can bring people together. To see that juxtaposed to Australia, which said no to a referendum for a voice to Parliament, that still will hold a day that marks genocide and colonization, is sometimes really difficult for me to comprehend. And goes back to another reason why I wanted to move here, was because I wanted to be able to jump into Te Ao Māori, Te Reo Māori, because I know that there are options and celebrations of that within the country, whereas that is not often a thing within Australia that you can do either, which is really awful. So one of the goals is to continue to learn while here, and hopefully can bring that somewhere else as well, can help impact elsewhere. But yeah, always was, always will be Aboriginal.
That's so beautiful. And you've answered the question I was going to ask you about, how crazy is the juxtaposition between Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand hasn't got it perfect, but in terms of the rest of the world, it's miles and miles and miles ahead. In any space you go into, there's a karakia, you can do your mihi or pepeha, you can it is not it's not frowned upon. There's always going to be people that are like, "Oh, whatever," but it's now more accepted, and people are more, I wasn't born here, but I'm proud to say my pepeha and my here because, hey, it's actually not just about being Te Ao Māori, it's about actually going back to your roots, and in indigenous culture, this is what we try and celebrate. My sister-in-law works she's in Australia in the indigenous space, and she's blown away by how hard it is in that space compared to New Zealand. And she always uses New Zealand case as an example when she's going to represent Indigenous Australians. But it's when I hear her stories and I hear you speaking about it, and it's so crazy that just a short flight across where we're so similar in so many ways, we are so different in one really important way.
Yeah,
which is crazy,
and,
right?
acknowledging that this is coming from a Pākehā, Anglo person to say this, and I'll never tell anybody that their situation is better or worse.
Yep.
Their situation is their situation. But I think for me, it's just, the fact that there was a debate around bilingual signs when the first time that I came to Aotearoa and I saw te reo used, I thought, this is the coolest thing ever. It's, it's so great that they're actually using the language of the First Peoples, and it's opened for everyone to see. The fact that that has now become what it is, we'll park that. But, for me, also coming from Tasmania, which what happened in Tasmania was the most successful genocide in the history of the world. So look that up, and how awful things in Tasmania went, where growing up there was people said that there were not Aboriginal Tasmanian people. That was a conversational piece that happened really regularly. An acknowledgement of country only started happening in my high school, I think last year or the year before. And so that's wild to me as well. And so again, coming from that to here, never going to tell Māori people here that it's better here than anywhere else. Please don't take this as that. It's more just what I'm able to see as a Pākehā is that there's also more broad support from non-Māori to celebrate, to recognize, to uplift those communities as well, where, it's very different.
Yeah, Tana, I guess you could speak to that there, Tana, with your journey and what you're seeing in the space.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think it's gone a long way from where I started and where it is now. Obviously there's always going to be things that could improve or could be better, and you're right, it is very situational, depending on like where you are in the country, for example, and stuff like that. But I think there are certain things that have definitely improved, and you're right, it is more commonplace and more commonly accepted, and there's always going to be people who don't accept the way it is, or have a different opinion to most, but that's always going to be the case. But I think I guess it's hard because like growing up, I never really had that full understanding of what it meant in myself to be Māori. And so now that I understand it and I accept my identity, I think some of those issues that we talk about and surround ourselves with, I don't see as such a big issue. Like obviously they're still confronting and still challenging conversations to have. But I think, if you are able to embrace your culture, no matter what your culture is, I think it's less of an issue to have other people, telling you it shouldn't be this way, because at least then you've accepted in yourself that, hey, this is my identity. I can't change that. And I'm proud of what my identity is, regardless of what all these differing opinions are out there. And of course, things that people say get to you at times, and it challenges what it is you believe. But I think, you come to live and accept that, it's never going to be a perfect world where everybody accepts everyone, unfortunately. But, sometimes, as much as it sucks, sometimes it can also help you truly embrace your identity and your culture, to go, actually, I'm happy with who I am. And if you're going to waste your time concerning yourself of what I should be feeling, then is it really me who's got the detriment of it, or is it you for wasting that time focusing on other things that are really don't matter to you that much?
Yeah, it's a mindset shift, right? Mindset shift, as you said, we're all different, we're all humans, and some of us will get affected by what other people say. Some of us will just go like, it's your problem, it's not my problem. But to get to that stage requires real self-awareness and real growth to go, actually, this is water off my back. But that's a hard stage to get to. Angus, we've been speaking for a while. I have a question to ask you, which I've got two questions. The first question is, you're involved in so many things. I mean, if I go to your LinkedIn profile, there's just so much on there. When I Google you, I see all these cool things you're involved in. But if we're going to distill it down to one passion that gets you up every day, that gets you fired up, what would that be? Because all the things that you speak about are just so full of passion and so full of, you could do so much with it. But is there one thing that you go, cool, if I could distill everything out and go, this is my jam, what would that be? And why?
Probably equity or social justice, I guess, would be the main thing. I feel like I've had an incredibly privileged life myself. I've had lots of challenges, and it was by no means a perfect life at all, but incredibly privileged. And I've been able to see people who, by no fault of their own, are not included in important parts of life. And by that, I mean decision-making, politics, community leadership, that kind of stuff. So I'm used to seeing people feeling downtrodden or not accepted or feeling like they don't have a part to play in something. Probably that a lot of that comes from, my journey with my sexuality as well, and coming out, and how traumatizing that was, and how awful, and how much I thought that had impacted my life. And then, being in Tasmania, being constantly told you're not part of the mainland is a legitimate thing that people say in Australia, and so just acknowledging how much people have to give and trying to create spaces that they feel comfortable and able to do that. And so at the moment, that is via and working with young people, because they are often not included, diminished, told to wait, told to, whatever it is to palm them off, when there's so much to offer, so much to give, so much experience, so much everything. But that obviously it extends to the queer community, which I'm, actively a part of, but any kind of marginalized group, trying to show the world the value, the power, the strength in these communities, and how much they should be a part of determining the trajectory of, the country or something like that. I think we would be in a lot better place if we look back and Parliament over the past 100 years had more Māori, had more people with disabilities, had more LGBTQIA plus people, had people who had worked hospitality, actual folks. I think we'd be in a different place. And so trying to make a world that looks more like that is kind of the goal.
Oh, I love that. I knew there'd be a passion right there, and it just comes down to the stuff that you do, but also, hey, like you said, everyday people have got knowledge and wisdom that we should listen to. You and I, or you don't have to be wearing a suit, or you don't have to be living in a political atmosphere the whole time. Everyone's got a story, and sometimes the story that we have is a story that's shared by the collective, and you just need a representative, which is beautiful. Our podcast, Angus, is called Baskets of Knowledge. In every episode, we ask our guests to share a piece of knowledge to put into our basket. What piece of knowledge would you like to put into our basket of knowledge for our listeners, and for myself and for Tane?
Oof, you've got so many great pieces of information in the basket already. I wouldn't know how to add to that. I think
if Angus, everyone adds information. Everybody adds value.
No, I agree. And so I would say that my bit of knowledge would be that you have the power to make change regardless of what you think of yourself. I'm not sure if that's a piece of knowledge as much as it is an attempted inspirational quote, but by what I mean is that no matter what people will say or the world kind of may look like to you, that you do have something to offer and something that can really make a positive impact. It could be improving recycling in your building. It could be, the cure for cancer and it's just waiting for you to be able to have access to education. So knowing that you can make change is probably what I'd pop in there. And my appendices for that is, you don't always have to be superheroes though. You don't have to be trying to change the world either. You can,
Yeah.
you have the opportunity to, don't feel like you're the only person who has to do it.
I love that, and I love to add to that. That you don't have to change the whole world, but as long as you change the world around you, with whatever that is, it could be like you said, the building. It could be your neighborhood. That is your world, and that's a big change. And I love that. That's we always forget about that in the business of life, that we can't make a change, but as you said, anyone can make a change, as long as the positive. Change can be positive or negative, but let's try and keep on the positive, guys, and everybody out there. Yeah. Tanya, any last words for Angus?
No, it's been really cool to get to know Angus and see what he's doing. And, you can tell, I think we've found through this podcast that there's a lot of passion behind what you're doing. And it's an obvious drive for what it is you're achieving in your scene, which is pretty cool to see. And I think, on a personal note, it's cool to take away and see that, you know what I mean? I think, obviously I've had a challenge, as I said right at the start, with the job search. And, at times it can be like, oh, well, why don't I just go, work at a supermarket, or, not to devalue those kind of things, but I know that for myself, that's not what I'm passionate about. But I think seeing the passion you have, with young people in particular, and knowing that I have very similar interests makes me see what the reward can be if I can have the patience and trust the process and what it is I'm trying to achieve. But it's been really cool to see what your journey is, and I hope that going forward that you'll continue to make the impact on the young people that you meet along the way.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm going to echo that. I'm going to echo the fact that we can. I mean, it's only one an hour chat, but in the hour, I can see why the people that we've spoken to before want us to speak to you, because the passion that you have, the energy you have. It's always hard over Zoom, but some people just come across as energetic with positive energy. It comes across really well. So, Angus, thank you for jumping on, and I'm sure our guests will have loved this conversation. And if you want to check out Angus, check out his LinkedIn. He always shares some really fantastic information on there, which I really found interesting, about all sorts of things, especially what's happening in the world today. We didn't touch on some of the stuff there because it could get down a whole rabbit hole, but there's some really interesting things that you share. So really, really, really thankful for that there.
Thanks for having me. And just as I said, the fact that you are providing a platform and an opportunity for other young people to have a say and share their story is awesome. So the work that you are doing as well is incredible and has an impact. And, there should be more podcasts like yours that are providing platforms for young folks to share what they're passionate about.
Thank you. It's our privilege and our honor, we think. Yeah. So Angus, thank you so much for jumping on. And our listeners, if you have not learned anything today, go back and listen again, because I'm pretty sure there is lots of nuggets that you can put into your daily lives or people around you. And as always, please feel free to share, like, comment on our podcast, because that's the only way we grow. But the most important thing for us is, remember, as you go on to the week or whatever you're doing, is to please try and put something into your parcel of knowledge. Till next time, ka kite, take care, and bye everybody.
Ka kite.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.